Hey everybody, I'm going to show you how to set up the AWS Agent Toolkit step by step in this demo. I'm going to be using Kiro as my IDE, but you can also use Claude Code, Cursor, Codex, whatever is your preferred tool of choice. It works for all of them. So let's get started and let's show you how to do it. So I'm going to be following along with this blog that I've written that also highlights all these steps, step by step, so that you can also read through this if you'd like. The blog link is going to be in the description below. So let's take a look. In this blog, if I scroll down, I'm just going to get to the good part here. There's several different AWS Agent Toolkit skills involved. There's different categories, the core AWS skills, which are like the foundational AWS skills for the most used services, such as cloud observability, storage like S3, serverless, containers, all that good stuff. But there's also some other ones grouped in the category of the AWS agents related to Bedrock and Agent Core, or AWS Data Analytics, or AWS agents for DevSecOps, and more. So let's take a look. Initially, in order to do this, you will need an AWS account, and you will need to configure your laptop with your AWS account. So you can find steps on how to do that also in the description below. I'll provide you with a blog guide that will show you how to set that up so that you have this prerequisite. Also in the blog, it talks about it right here. Sign up here if you don't have one yet. And then AWS credentials on your machine, how to set this up, because you're going to need to configure the AWS CLI. And what that means is in your terminal, if you go to your terminal, if I just type in AWS -- version, you should see this particular version. At the very least, AWS CLI 2.35.11. If you can have that one, that's going to be the prerequisite version you're going to need in order to follow these steps along. Also, you're going to need to have UV installed, which is a Python package tool that runs MCP proxy. So you can install it various different ways. I've provided the instructions here in this blog as well. You're going to also need Node.js if you choose to use NPX version, but I'm going to show you the AWS CLI way of doing it. Here's the AWS CLI, and you're going to want to configure the AWS CLI with your AWS credentials, which is going to be in this link right here. So once you have those prerequisites set up, you'll have the same environment that I currently have in terms of how to get started now. So you'll just run this command, AWS configure agent toolkit. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go here. Let me make this font a little bit bigger. And this is my Kiro IDE. I have my terminal open. I'll just type in AWS configure agent toolkit. Now, when I do that, I already have it installed, but this is what it's going to look like for you. It's going to look like this. So we're going to look at all the different editors that it supports. And if you have any of these downloaded, it'll show that it is found. It'll detect the editor that you have. For me, I only have Kiro installed because that's personally all I need for my development needs. It's more than good enough for me. So it shows that it's available. And so I'll just press enter here. So it fetches some AWS skills, right? Some best practices that tell the agent how to use various different AWS services, such as Amazon Bedrock or the billing and cost management, so that you can maybe configure a budget just by sending a prompt saying, hey, I want to configure it so that there's a billing alarm for me when my budget reaches over $200 per month, something like that, right? AWS containers, CloudFormation, right? But guess what? That's only 14 default AWS skills, but I'll say yes and install it. So it'll go ahead and install those 14 core AWS skills. But here's the next thing. The next problem that we're going to solve is that it's going to ask me to set up the MCP server for AWS as well. The MCP server is also important. So skills are different. It's going to tell the agent the best practices and guidance and how to do certain things and tasks on AWS. However, the MCP server is going to be able to do various other things. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes, and it'll configure my MCP server to Kiro for the AWS MCP server. And if I take a look at this, AWS MCP, there's various different tools that allow my agents to actually call my AWS account APIs via API calls to take actions on my behalf by just me sending a prompt. So, it can do various different tasks. So skills are best practices on how to do certain tasks, and the MCP server is the actual access for your agent to be able to perform those tasks and access your account. And it can also do certain other things related to just overall general purpose, like reading the official documentation from the live AWS updates, because AWS is shipping out new updates every day, every week, new patches, new best practices, and so on, right? Some deprecated features that will no longer work. In order for your agent to know about all that in real time, which your agent does not know about by default, the MCP server's read documentation tool will be able to do that, or search documentation tool. So there's other capabilities as well, other than just to access your AWS account and make actions via API calls on your behalf. Now, with that being said, well, only 14 skills have been installed, but in my blog, I say that there are a lot more than 14. There are, look at all that. At the current time, I say that there are probably about 64. Basically, there are a lot more than 14 skills, right? 64 today, right? There are around 64 today and growing. So how do we get the rest of these? Well, now that we have the AWS MCP server, right, I can actually just ask Kiro, use the AWS MCP server, use the AWS MCP server to search documentation and retrieve all the AWS Agent Toolkit skills for me. Currently, I only have 14 skills installed. So I'll just tell it to do that. Simple prompt, I'm prompting it. Now, let's take a look at how the AWS MCP server is going to be utilized by my Kiro agent. And I'm running Cloud Opus 4.8 as the foundation model for my Kiro agent. So let's see what happens. So as you can see, it's running a tool call for the AWS MCP search documentation. And excuse me, I'm recording a video here real quick. Hey, excuse me, I'm recording a video here. I'm recording a video content for AWS.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Do you have this room booked or?
Yeah.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I do.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. All right. Let me restart that part. How do I lock this door? Has everybody locked this door? That just messed up my whole video. Okay. Anyways, we're gonna make some edits on this video now. So for as you can see, it is searching the AWS documentation for all available Agent Toolkit skills. So we can compare against my currently installed 14 skills. So it's gonna do a tool call to the AWS MCP for the AWS search documentation tool. So let's take a look at that AWS search documentation tool. And I'm going to say allow. I'm going to allow my agent to make that tool call. Awesome. So it's just getting back some JSON with a bunch of other information. Let's take a look. I can actually make this a little bit bigger screen here. Let's see. Cool. Yep. So that one tool call returned 20 more skills, and then it's going to search documentation for more. It's actually going to do a search phrase for like maybe deploy containers, Kubernetes, architecture diagram, observability and monitoring, right? So it's going to look for more stuff. So it's querying the AWS documentation for more search terms and potential services and actions for more skills. I'm going to allow it to do that. So let's take a look. Yeah, CloudTrail, ADOT, auto instrumentation, right? These are a lot more other skills that didn't come initially with my initial install that only had those 14 skills. And yeah, let's take a look. It's gonna continue to do some work. Okay, it's identified already 56 more unique skills. And it's gonna look for more stuff like SageMaker. And guess what? If I'm actually working on certain services and I know what services I wanna work with, I can tell it to search based on those services, and it won't search through every single possible search query that it can imagine, like CloudFront, Route 53, API Gateway, Load Balancer, Web Application Firewall, right? It doesn't have to do all that. Right now, I'm just telling it to do everything, so just to show you an idea. But you can totally nail it down to what services you're interested in working with, and then tell it in your prompt to search for that. And it'll have a more targeted search, so it's not gonna pull everything. So here we go. Let's take a look. It looks like it's retrieving a lot more stuff here. I think after this one, I'll just tell it that's enough. So let's see what we get. Lots more than 14 exists. Yep, we verified that. All right, allow. That's enough. Now that you've found. Okay, I'll tell it that's enough. Download those extra ones that you found so far. I don't want it to keep looking for millions of other skills. So let's see what we get. Yep, the user wants to install the Agent Toolkit skills they're missing. They currently only have 14 installed, and so yeah, let's take a look. It's just double checking where to put those skills that it wants to install in my system. It's going to be in the user home directory .kiro folder /skills. Okay, so it says I can either use npx skills add AWS Agent Toolkit for AWS/skills to install everything at once, or use the AWS Agent Toolkit add skill command to add specific skills. So it looks like it's going to go with the npx version. Checking if I have npx first. Allow. Going to confirm my 14 skills that I already have first. There you go. We see a lot more skills that it's listing out now. So it ran the command AWS Agent Toolkit list available skills, right? Notice that those are different from the ones that mine came with, right? Mine had like AWS architecture diagram, billing and cost management, AWS blocks, cloud formation, right? But it did not have anything related to Aurora DSQL, as you can see here, right? Amazon Aurora DSQL, Postgres. So let's take a look at what it's going to do next. Cool, those are all the other available skills right here. Look at all these other skills here other than those 14. So the ones I have installed are these versus available are these, and then the ones I have installed are here, right? So maybe I can start installing some of these other ones. All right, yeah, catalog has 66 skills total. So it went from 64 from the time of the release of my blog to 66. Let's take a look at what it's going to do there. Now it's going to use this command, AWS Agent Toolkit add skill, with the parameter skill name, and then it's going to just give it some of those skill names that it found. So I'll allow it to do that. For AWS Lambda micro VMs, that skill, right? So now I'm just getting all these other skills installed. And as you can see, now I have probably AWS Lambda micro VMs, this new skill added, right? So I'm going beyond those original 14, and that's how you can do that. So in summary, with some of that prompting, ultimately it relied on this command, AWS Agent Toolkit list available skills, and this command is what allowed it to find a lot more than those original 14 skills. As you can see here, if I scroll down, and then let me minimize this tool call, and it was able to get a lot more skills. So now it's going to go ahead and start installing more skills. I'll tell it just always allow for this one, so it stops asking me for this workspace, allow. And yeah, that's basically how you do it. That's how you get all the other skills installed. And we can, while it's doing that, I would like to show you what some of these skills even look like, right? Let's dive a little bit deeper. So, for example, for AWS IAM, right? That's pretty important. Identity and access management, account security, pretty important. So let's take a look. I'm going to just go ahead and open this in preview mode so it's easier to read. So this skill, so the agent will know now all these other best practices related to AWS identity and access management, right? Some edge case, verified edge cases for CloudTrail. So there's some edge cases that agents usually trip up on. It's listed here exactly what those edge cases are and what to do and what not to do. Perfect. So, yeah, as you can see, some best practices for organizations, AWS organizations, SDK specifics. Right? These are very specific best practices only experts would really know. Now your agent can be the expert instead of just being pre-trained on general data. It even has code snippets for some policy evaluations, service-specific roles, and so on. So that's just related to identity and access management skill. But what about for, yeah, it even gives access to certain documentation related to that. If I go back to the skills, what about for AWS containers, right? It talks about some gotchas for AWS Fargate. These must be valid combinations because the agent can totally trip up and hallucinate some of these numbers. We have it written down and set in stone for the agent so it knows exactly what guide to follow. Cool. So those are the agent skills, and right now it's just working on installing a bunch. Obviously in this demo I showed you how to install like as many as possible, but I recommend doing the list available skills command as we saw earlier, and then figuring out which skills might make sense for you and your use cases that you're working on. As a developer, you should kind of have a better idea of what particular problems you're trying to solve. And based on those particular problems, you can prompt Kiro or your agent related to that problem and what services would be appropriate for that, and then install the skills accordingly related to that. Awesome. Thank you for joining. In the next video, I'll show you how we can use these skills to maybe deploy a front-end application in Amplify. So, till next time. Peace.